Venerable Muruttettuwe Ananda Thero raises a red flag against Minister Pavitra Vanniyarachchi. Special police operation underway to locate those who left the Western Province prior to quarantine curfew. Speaker notifies Prime Minister and Opposition Leader to nominate members for the Parliamentary Council.
Good evening and welcome. This is Prime Time News on TV1. For the Newsfirst team, I'm Zamal Ratnayaka. On to your lead story for the day. COVID-19 cases in Sri Lanka topped 10,000 today. The total number of confirmed COVID-19 cases in Sri Lanka currently stands at 10,105. According to the Epidemiology Unit data, 314 cases were reported today. 140 COVID-19 patients were discharged after making a full recovery. The COVID-19 death toll in the country currently stands at 19.
43 treatment centers have been established. A 44th is being established. 5,413 people are being treated at 43 centers. Those centers include 7 intermediary treatment centers. A record number of 11,552 PCR tests were conducted yesterday. They are being analyzed at the labs today. The Health Ministry has taken steps to expedite the process of releasing people from quarantine centers after streamlining the process of conducting tests. The necessary circulars will be issued today. The interventions which are required to be fulfilled by the government to curtail the spread of the virus have been done. These include conducting PCR tests, identifying new patients, quarantine procedures, and conducting PCR tests on those who are undergoing quarantine. We request the people to follow all directives and health guidelines issued by the Ministry of Health. Those who are residents of Colombo and its vicinity need to follow these strictly. Because there is a spike in the number of infections in these areas, we have observed that those residing in apartment complexes tend to visit other apartments without wearing face masks. Hand washing is also extremely important. If those practices are followed, we can stop the dissemination of the virus. Failing to do so will only result in authorities having to impose harsher conditions. The office of the Kurunagala Public Health Inspectors took steps to impose travel restrictions in Mallavapitiya, Kurunagala after 7 people in the area tested positive for the virus yesterday.
Corona virus ආසාදිත වුණ පුද්ගලයන් 8 දෙනෙකු පමණ මෙම ප්‍රදේශයේ සිටින බවට සෞඛ්‍ය අංශ විසින් දන්වා ඇති බැවින් ඔබ තම තමන්ගේ නිවස්වල රැඳී සිටින්න.
The infected had been placed under self-quarantine and health authorities are tracking their close contacts. Meanwhile, 8 more people tested positive for the virus when random tests were conducted in the Kurunagala town. The area of Vilgoda in the Kurunagala town has been isolated. The infected have been placed under self-quarantine and are being monitored by the public health inspectors. Meanwhile, a 34-year-old employee at the Labour Department in Colombo tested positive for COVID-19. This individual had travelled to Anuradhapura from Colombo before he tested positive for the virus. The Anuradhapura Municipal Council today identified the locations to which the patient had travelled and disinfected them. The office of the Kottagala Public Health Inspector confirmed that an employee at the Palliagoda Fish Market and a close contact of his who were quarantined at the Dretton Estates in Hatton and in the Kottagala town tested positive for the virus. 4 members of the patient's family have been directed to self-quarantine and 2 patients have been sent to the Kandakaru quarantine center. Meanwhile, 8 COVID-19 patients were identified in Ahaliagoda. 4 of them were close contacts of patients at the Palliagoda Fish Market. The office of the Public Health Inspector in Ahaliagoda said that the remaining 4 are close contacts of the patients detected from the Colombo dockyard. The spouse and an 11-month-old infant of a fishmonger at the Palliagoda Fish Market are among those who tested positive for the virus today. Another woman who tested positive is employed as the head of a sub-post office in the area. 200 close contacts of COVID-19 patients identified today have been placed under self-quarantine.
A woman employed at the Kotagala Free Trade Zone tested positive for COVID-19 today. The woman, a 27-year-old resident of Ratgama, was admitted to the Mahamodara Hospital in Gaul recently, and she was subsequently directed to a PCR test. After she tested positive, 125 of her close contacts were tested for the virus.
Meanwhile, police media spokesperson DIG Ajit Rohana said around 60 police officers have tested positive for COVID-19.
60 police officers have been found as COVID positive cases, and they have been sent to treatment centers. Approximately 300 police officers are being followed quarantine procedures at the moment. According to our investigation, it was found that the source of police COVID patients is the incident of Fish Market, Palliagoda. So therefore, the Acting Inspector General of Police has taken all the measures in order to prevent the spreading of COVID-19 among police officers. Additional strength is deployed in order to do police duties instead of the officers who are on quarantine procedures.
Quarantine curfew came into effect for the entire Western Province from midnight last night, taking into account the resurgence of COVID-19 infections in the island. Quarantine curfew will be lifted at 5 a.m. on Monday, the 2nd of November. Media spokesperson of police, attorney at law DIG Ajit Rohana said no one will be allowed to enter or exit the Western Province following the imposition of quarantine curfew. This has been done in a bid to curtail the spread of COVID-19 to other districts. Commander of the Sri Lanka Army, Lieutenant General Shavendra Silva, expressed his dismay regarding the behavior of certain groups who left the Western Province and travelled to other districts subsequent to the announcement regarding quarantine curfew. The Army Commander also requested those residing in other districts to avoid large gatherings. Media spokesperson of police noted that the IGP has directed the police to launch a special operation to locate those who travel to other districts prior to the imposition of curfew and to institute necessary action against them.
People who left the Western Province violating the curfew that was imposed and those who left the province on Thursday will be questioned on the reasons as to why they left, the date that they left, and steps will be taken to file legal action against them for violating regulations imposed under the provisions of the quarantine ordinance.
The city of Colombo and surrounding areas seemed deserted following the imposition of curfew for the Western Province. However, essential services will continue to operate despite the curfew. Operations of the dedicated economic centre in Tambuttegama were halted today based on a decision made by the Traders Association of the dedicated economic centre. PHIs in Tambuttegama decided to close down 11 shops at the dedicated economic centre yesterday. The Traders Association announced that the dedicated economic centre will remain closed until the process of conducting PCR tests concludes. The Public Health Inspector's Office of Panadura noted that 19 COVID-19 patients have been detected from Panadura, while more than 400 PCR tests have been conducted in the area. Police roadblocks have been set up at the exit and entry points of all interchanges along expressways. Media spokesperson of police, attorney at law DIG Ajit Rohana said no one would be allowed to travel on the expressway except for special cases. The DIG added those travelling on the southern expressway will have to exit from the Kurudugaha Hatakma interchange.
Meanwhile, senior DIG in charge of the Western Province, Deshabandhu Tennakon, engaged in an inspection tour at the Valipanna interchange of the Southern Expressway that separates the Western Province and the Southern Province.
The general public is baffled at the moment because news is being circulated of large numbers of people from the Western Province leaving towards the outskirts of the country. That is not verified information. I would like to state with responsibility that no such thing has happened. People who are leaving home from work, people who came to Colombo for medical purposes and for private purposes have left in this manner. So the general public should not be afraid. The IGP instructed us, and he must have instructed the relevant authorities in other areas too, that a special police unit has been deployed to look into and locate the people who have left the province violating quarantine curfew.
Thereafter, senior DIG Deshabandhu Tennakon met with the people who are in quarantine in Valipenna.
දුවයි පුතයි බෑනයි දරුවයි.
දැන් පුතාට මොකක්ද ඇතුළේ සම්බන්ධ මොකක්ද?
එයාට මේ පෑලිය කොටි.
දැන් මාළු මාර්කට් ගිහලා එයා කොහෙද වැඩ කරලා තියෙන්නේ?
එයා බේරුවල වරා ඉන්නේ ලොරියක වැඩ කරන්නේ.
අද්දේට උඩින් ඉන්නේ ඔලින් විතරයි.
නෑ අපි 7 දෙනෙක් ඉන්නවා.
දැන් ඕගොල්ලන්ට මේ දවස්වල ඉන්දුන ආකාර සම්බන්ධ උපදෙස් ලැබිලා තියෙනවද? උපදෙස් ලැබිලා තියෙනවා. පොලිසියෙන් උපදෙස් ලැබුණා.
Senior DIG Deshabandhu Tennakon distributed dry rations to several families who are in quarantine as well.
එතකොට දැන් මේක විතරක් පළමු කළ නිරෝධායන ගෙදර. ඔව් සර්. මෙතන අර රෙඩ් නොටිස් එක දාලා ඔය ඇලෙන්නේ නැහැ. එතකොට දැන් ඕගොල්ලන්ට අවශ්‍ය උපදෙස් ලැබිලා තියෙනවා.
Meanwhile, the police took legal action against those who organized a wedding violating curfew imposed in the area.
The Kollupitiya police is conducting investigation into an alleged wedding that was conducted at a 4-star hotel in Golface, Kolpiti police area. According to police investigations, approximately 35 persons have attended the wedding. We have appointed a special police team in order to conduct investigation, and the team is led by OIC crime of Kollupitiya police station. He is conducting investigation on the instructions of senior DIG Western Province, and we are hoping to take action against the hotel management, and apart from that the organizers of the wedding under the quarantine law, quarantine rules and regulation.
It is regrettable to note that as of today, samples obtained from the community have stopped in most provinces. We have contacted people from those provinces yesterday. We came to know that results of these samples that were taken a week ago have not been given as yet. We are kindly requesting the President to demand the health authorities for reports with details of the samples obtained and the districts and provinces that they were taken from. In certain provinces, tests have not been conducted at all. The Kurunegala district is provided with only 50 PCR kits per day. How are they supposed to conduct tests with just 50 kits? The number of close contacts identified is very high as well. When the people from Mathura contacted us, they said that around 3,000 sample results are still pending.
දැන් මාතර අපිට කතා කළා මාතර මේ වෙනකොට ගත්ත සාම්පල් 3000ක විතර ප්‍රතිඵල එන්න තියෙනවා.
President of the Public Service United Nurses Union, Venerable Muruthettuwe Anandathero, convened a media briefing and issued a warning to Minister of Health Pavitra Wanyarachi.
I saw the Minister of Health Pavitra Wanyarachi saying that the community spread of the COVID-19 pandemic in the country has not yet begun. Is the minister making these statements after looking into the matter? We don't know if someone is just saying these things. The nurses and other staff members attending to COVID-19 patients are treated very poorly. Although we spoke against this at the National Hospital and got our benefits, these benefits must be afforded to all employees at hospitals across the country. If not, we would like to issue a red notice to the Minister of Health. We have sent you a letter including the issues that we face. We have submitted the shortcomings in this sector. If you don't look into these matters and take the necessary steps to solve them, nurses will have to isolate themselves in their homes. We will hold discussions and reach a decision in the future. Contrary to the provisions of the Trade Unions Ordinance, Health Minister Pavitra Wanyarachi held discussions and appointed 4 members of the GMOA to oversee trade union activities. We questioned the Ministry of State Administration regarding these appointments. They said that these appointments cannot be made. It is their advice that is being implemented everywhere. The other unions are not being given any consideration. They must first consult the other trade unions and then make the appointments. We would like to point out to the government that giving these appointments to 4 members of the GMOA and paying them public funds and allowing them to engage in their trade union activities is completely unfair.
A group of people who were placed under quarantine in Negombo after arriving in the island from overseas complained of having been quarantined at a hotel in Negombo for over 14 days.
I came here on the 20th from Canada through Abu Dhabi, and we had already been tested for COVID-19. We were again tested at the airport. They brought us and quarantined us at a 3-star hotel in Negombo. We paid 175,000 rupees to the hotel for that. We have stayed here for 10 days now. But the management of the hotel informed us that we will have to remain here for more than 14 days, as the reports will take 4 days to come in. They asked us to pay 12,500 rupees per day for another 4 days.
We were supposed to be released today after spending 14 days in quarantine. Yesterday they called me and informed me that there was something wrong with the sample that they collected from me for the PCR test. They said they have to conduct the test again. They asked me to conduct the PCR test privately and to remain in a hotel until I did that. I said I didn't have money to pay for a private PCR test and that I couldn't stay at the hotel for any longer. When I questioned them further, I realized that they had taken samples of 10 people and they were supposed to send it to the MRI for the test. But they have not sent the samples. The MRI reports came back saying that the samples are missing. They said that they are looking for the samples.
report no sample කියලා. ඒතර no sample නම් මම ඒවද ඇතුළට කොහෙද sample? Sample අපි හොයනවා.
අපි ටිකට් සඳහා 3 ගුණයක පමණ විශාල මුදලක් අපි ගෙවා.
We spent about 7 months in Canada and paid 3 times the value of a usual plane ticket and came to Sri Lanka on the 3rd. They conducted a PCR test at the airport. After that they quarantined us at this hotel and we have to pay 15,000 rupees per day. We spent about 210,000 rupees in total. We were tested again in 10 days at a government hospital and they said it will take 4 days for the reports to come back. The hotel informed us that we will have to stay here for longer. We are not in a position to pay for our stay at this hotel any further.
We questioned the head of the National Operations Centre for the Prevention of COVID-19 outbreak, Lieutenant General Shavendra Silva, about this matter. He said that the relevant authorities have been informed to quarantine these people at their homes.
The police have launched a special operation to locate a gang which has been robbing houses in the guise of public health inspectors.
Mahava police wasame Kattapawwa.
3 people have entered a house in Kattapawwa yesterday at around 3:30 p.m. This area falls under the jurisdiction of the Mahava police. The people have claimed that they are health officials and that they need to conduct PCR tests on the husband and wife of the house. It is reported that they had been given a pill before conducting the test. They do not remember anything after that. They have woken up this morning. The robbers have looted all their jewellery. The value of the jewellery exceeds 300,000 rupees. 3 teams have been assigned to probe this matter. Investigations have commenced under the supervision of the SSP of Nikavarattiya.
People living in the surrounding areas of Colombo and in Mattakkuliya have been severely impacted due to COVID-19 and due to the quarantine curfew that is in effect. Most of the people who are affected are daily wage earners.
ඉතින් රස්සාවක් නැතුව මිනිසුන්ට එකක් අමාරුයි බඩු ගන්න. ගේ පාර නම් පොඩ හරි උදව් හම්බ වුණා. මේ සැරේ නම් ඒ මුකුත්ම නැහැ.
பிள்ளைங்களை வச்சு நாங்கள் உள்ளுக்கு இருக்க சொன்னனால இருக்கிறோம் எல்லாரும் மாஸ்க் போட்டுக்கிட்டு. வெளியே இறங்க வேணாம்னு சொல்லிட்டாங்க போலீஸால வந்து. சாப்பிடுறதுக்கெல்லாம் எங்களுக்கு வழி ஒன்றும் இல்லை. எங்கிட்டாலையும் எங்களுக்கு ஒரு ஆதாரம் ஒன்றுமே இல்லை. கிராம் சேகா கூட இங்கிட்டு வந்து பார்க்கல.
මේ කට්ටියට දැන් සති දෙකක් විතර වෙනවා සානයක් හම්බුන්නේ.
නිරෝධාන්නේ කියලා ඇතුළට දැම්මොත් නිරෝධාන්නේට මොනාරි ගෙනල්ලා දෙන්න ඕනේ. මේ මිනිස්සු කොයින් කියලා කණ්ඩද? ගේ ඇතුලේ වැලි ආරලා කණ්ඩ බෑනේ මාත්‍යා. එළියට ගියොත් ගාලා එලවනවා. ඇතුළට ඵලයන් කොයින්ද ඇතුළට කියලා මිනිස්සෙක් ඉන්නේ.
We monitored the situation in Gamanupura Mattakkuliya as well.
22 වෙනිදා ඉඳන් ගෙදර ඉන්නේ. මම අපි සාරිවිඩ කුල තමයි ජීවත් වෙන්නේ. ඒකත් තිකුණ ගන්න යන්න බෑ. සමුද්දිය දිනනවා සමුද්දියේ සල්ලි තාම දෙන්නේ නැහැ.
එම්ෙන් හම්බ වෙන ටිකක් කනවා. දැන් මේ ළමයට පිටියකටත් දුක් විඳගෙන ඉන්නවා අපි. තාම බත් පිගානක් කිව්වේ නැහැ ගෙදර ළමයිට දවල් වේලට. අපි මාත්‍ය සාරිවිඩ තට්ටු ඉස්සුවත් විතරයි අපිට කන්න තියෙන්නේ.
Newsfirst inquired the chairman of the Colombo District Development Coordinating Committee, Parliamentarian Pradeep Udugoda, of this issue.
As the government, we have taken steps to distribute hampers valued more than 10,000 rupees to the families who are currently under quarantine. These hampers will be enough for 2 weeks. That program is in motion now. We have handed over the responsibility at a divisional secretariat level to the Grama Niladaris. As a government, we take responsibility for the security and the health of the people. Some people have alleged that they do not receive the 10,000 rupee hamper. Some people have alleged that they did not receive the 10,000 rupee hamper. If someone does not receive that relief, please inform your Grama Niladari through the phone. If it is possible, we will provide that hamper to everyone who is under quarantine.
Most people in the Gampaha District share the same issue of not having a means of income to survive these days. Due to this, people are unable to purchase essential goods.
ඊයේ දවසනම කෑවේ එක වේලයි. දවල්ට කෑවා එච්චරයි. මිල වන්දනේ විදියට ආපු දවසේ ඉඳන් මේ වගේ තමයි.
කඩවලුත් දැන් ඉතින් වහලා කෑම ගන්න බෑ.
ආදාය මාර්ගයක් නැහැ. මේ නැත්කම තමයි මේ වැඩේ කරන්නේ. කර්ම විදියක් නැහැ. අපි වේලක් කාලා වේලක් තමයි පිරිමහ ගන්නෙ. නිසා මේ දරුවන් බඩගිනින් ඉන්න ඒගොල්ලන්ට කන්න කිරිපැකට්ටයක් ගන්න අපිට වත් කමක් නැති තත්ත්වයක තියෙන්නේ.
ළමයිට ඉතින් අර එක වෙලක් හරි අපි බඩගිනි හරි ඉඳලා ළමයිට දෙනවා කන්න. දැන් නෑ අපි මේ කැඳ කඩේ කරන්නේ.
නොවැම්බර් මාසේ 10 වෙනිදා වෙනකොට we have advised the government agent to complete the program of distributing the 5,000 rupees to all the 484,000 families who are living in these areas where quarantine curfew is in effect. This will be completed by the 10th of November. Steps will be taken to send the money to all divisional secretariats in the Gampaha District by next Tuesday. Even now, some of the money has been received through the Ministry of Finance. So I have to remind everyone that as a government, we have taken the steps to aid everyone who is in distress in the Gampaha District.
සහනය ලබා දෙන්න රජයක් හැටියට මේ වෙනකොට ක්‍රියාමාර්ග අරන් තියෙනවා කියන එක මතක් කරන්න ඕනේ.
With the second outbreak of COVID-19 in the country, Sri Lanka's export sector is facing a variety of challenges and difficulties. The number of COVID-19 cases reported from the garment industry, one of the main components of the export sector, has created many obstacles in daily operations. Originating from a factory in Minuangota, the virus then spread to several factories in the Katunayaka export processing zone. Amidst concerns that the prevailing curfew restrictions may impact export sector operations, Chairman of the Sri Lanka's Export Development Board, Prabhash Subasinghe, said the EDB, together with state authorities, are encouraging all export factions to function adhering to health guidelines.
Most of the zones are operating. We have been encouraging all export factories to function, following all the required health guidelines, etc. And the Export Development Board, the Board of Investment, we are facilitating all these companies to continue to operate. I would think currently most of the factories are operational.
Earnings from merchandise exports recorded a positive growth of 5.16% in September 2020 to $1,001.27 million as compared to the value of $952.1 million recorded in September 2019.
If you look at the first 9 months of the year, we've seen a total merchandise exports of about 7.4 billion. Last year it was about, in the same time period, 8.8 billion. But the recent months, especially August, September, has been positive. But the Chamber also did a survey among exporters in August and September. And there also we saw there was optimism in terms of the outlook for both exports and the economy.
And our estimate suggested that nearly 2.3 billion US dollars worth of export will be lost to Sri Lanka. In our study, we mostly focus on the first wave. However, the second wave, Sri Lanka export will have a huge impact, partly because of the present COVID-19 pandemic. It had a severe impact on the production sector and in particular on export sector. You know, COVID-19 has created a supply shock as well as a demand shock. The impact will pass on to the coming years. And the second wave is much severe on Sri Lanka's production sector as well as export sector.
Sri Lanka imposed restrictions on its imports in April this year to prevent the rupee from further depreciating. Although certain restrictions have been lifted, many retail businesses continue to face several inconveniences.
Whilst there have been exemptions granted to the export industries, the smaller companies that export are having trouble sourcing supplies for their manufacturing. There are certain raw materials that are unavailable in Sri Lanka. So while import restrictions in some cases can be looked at as a short-term measure to provide relief to the currency, I think the long-term viability of this should be reassessed, particularly because it affects smaller export companies as they don't always qualify for the sort of exemptions that are provided in terms of what they can export.
So I believe the sector has already adapted to the post-COVID era. One good news is that if you talk about world trade, at the inception of COVID, the World Bank was thinking that world trade will reduce by 30%. But as of now, world trade or global trade has only reduced by 10%. So I think that's also one of the reasons why Sri Lanka was doing exceptionally well over the last few months. Of course, as a concern, I think the world has to learn to adapt and manage, and we need to get through this time period.
Is the economy in peril? What you should know about Sri Lanka's national debt. Discussion with Chairman of Advocata Institute, Mr. Murtaza Jafarji, former Chairman of the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce, Mr. Chandrajaya Ratna, and former Deputy Governor of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, Dr. W.A. Vijayawardena. Hosted by COO Advocata Institute, Mr. Dhananath Fernando. On the 31st of October at 9:30 p.m. on TV1 and on Newsfirst social media platforms.
In more economy-related news, headline inflation as measured by the year-on-year change in the Colombo Consumer Price Index remained unchanged at 4% in October 2020.
In a release, the central bank said food inflation decreased to 10% in October 2020 from 11.5% in September 2020. The core inflation, which reflects the underlying inflation in the economy, increased marginally to 3% in October 2020 from 2.9% in September 2020. However, annual average core inflation declined to 3.4% in October 2020 from 3.6% in September 2020.
Today is the VAP full moon Poya Day. Today marks the end of the Vas season for bhikkhus. However, due to the resurgence of COVID-19 in the country, many devotees were forced to engage in religious activities from their homes. It was on a Vap full moon Poya Day that the Buddha ended his 7th Vassana retreat for the rainy season since his enlightenment, which he had spent in the celestial abode of Thautissa. There, he had engaged in preaching Abhidhamma to the Devas and deities headed by Matru Deva. While monks who obtained Peravas ended their Vas season on the Vap full moon Poya Day, other monks who obtained Pasuvas end their Vas season on the Il full moon Poya Day. Meanwhile, the Department of Buddhist Affairs has informed temples across the island to hold Katina Pujas with minimum participation of devotees due to the prevailing COVID-19 situation in the country. When doing so, it is important to inform the public health inspector of the relevant area. Religious observances in many Buddhist religious sites were conducted without the attendance of devotees today. Devotees in the areas where curfew is in effect observed still from their homes.
The Buddha has preached the following in the Sabbasava Sutra. First, the Buddha preaches, the illness should be identified. Then he preaches, the senses should be protected so that one does not contract the illness. Thirdly, the Buddha preached that the items which are being used should be used more vigilantly. There are social issues which should be dealt with intricately, especially at a time like this. The Buddha has also preached that many issues can be resolved through meditation. We can draw comparisons between the preachings of Lord Buddha and the quarantine procedure and learn a lot. Meanwhile, the traditional procedure which precedes the state Katina ceremony was held today under the patronage of President Gotabaya Rajapaksa. The state Katina ceremony will be held on the 7th and 8th of November at the historic Somavati religious site. This is the first time a Katina ceremony is being held under state sponsorship after the reign of King Parakramabahu II. The Amadam Sisilasa program, which is held every Poya Day based on a concept introduced by Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa, was held at the temple trees today. The Prime Minister also worshipped a casket which is to be donated to the Somavati sacred site. The casket, which is embossed with pearls, stands at 6 feet tall. It will be donated to the Somavati sacred site to celebrate the Prime Minister's birthday and to shower blessings to the country in order to rid the nation of COVID-19.
Meanwhile, the birthday of Holy Prophet Muhammad or Miladun Nabi was celebrated today. However, Muslims did not gather at the mosques to engage in their religious observances owing to the COVID-19 pandemic in the country. Prophet Muhammad was born in 571 AD in Mecca, Saudi Arabia.
The president in his message said he believes that living by the ideal of sacrifice that the Prophet made for the sake of humanity lays the foundation for a better and more developed society. The president added, quote, "I hope when the world celebrates the birth of Prophet, Muslims will join hands with determination to defeat all forms of extremism and create a better society, keeping in line with the values he professed." Unquote. Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa requested Muslim devotees to celebrate Miladun Nabi while adhering to proper health instructions and according to Islamic guidelines. In his message, the Prime Minister said that Islamic countries have always supported Sri Lanka unconditionally in international organizations. Opposition leader Sajith Premadasa in his message said that Muslim devotees must celebrate this day in a special and exemplary manner. He added that Muslim devotees across the world celebrate this holy day this year under unexpected circumstances amid social restrictions. Issuing a statement, former governor and leader of the National Unity Alliance Azad Sali said, quote, "Learning from the exemplary life and the teachings of the beloved Prophet Muhammad, Muslims should always be prepared to face unprecedented hardships and challenges in life." He also requested Muslim devotees to reclaim and rekindle the narrative of love and mercy that Prophet Muhammad taught through expressing tenderness and mercy in manifesting the Muslim faith.
Air Vice Marshal Sudarshana Patirana has been appointed as the new commander of the Sri Lanka Air Force. The appointment was made by President Gotabaya Rajapaksa. Air Vice Marshal Sudarshana Patirana will commence duties as the 18th Commander of the Sri Lanka Air Force on the 2nd of November. Air Vice Marshal Sudarshana Patirana is a past pupil of Dharmaraj College, Kandy. He was promoted to the rank of Pilot Officer in the General Duties Pilot Branch on the 2nd of January 1987. In 1990, he was selected to be amongst the first 6 SLAF pilots to convert to supersonic F-7BS fighter aircraft at the No. 5 Jet Squadron, and in 1995, he was selected to fly the more advanced Curfew fighter aircraft at No. 10 Jet Squadron. He has previously served as the commanding officer of the Curfew and F-7 fighter squadrons and the acting commander of the MiG-27 fighter squadron. Meanwhile, according to Sri Lanka Air Force, the outgoing commander of the Air Force, Air Marshal Sumangala Dias, is due to retire on the 2nd of November. In light of Vap Full Moon Poya Day, opposition leader Sajith Premadasa toured the Sri Bodhirajam temple in Kalaoya earlier today.
Meanwhile, opposition leader Sajith Premadasa called on the chief incumbent of the Sri Bodhirajam temple in Kalaoya and chief prelate of the North Central Province, Venerable Madampe Saranathisatero, and obtained blessings.
In the
light of the increase of COVID-19 cases, our only request for the number of PCR tests to be increased. Only a limited number of PCR tests are being conducted now. We can only question as to what they did to the foreign aid which we received in the recent past.
PCR යන්ත්‍ර අපේ රටට ලබා ගන්නට සෞඛ්‍ය අමාත්‍යාංශය කටයුතු නොකළ.
Speaker Mahinda Apabewardena has requested the Prime Minister and the opposition leader to nominate members for the new Parliamentary Council.
The Constitutional Council, established via the 19th Amendment to the Constitution, ceased to exist after the 20th Amendment to the Constitution became law after the Speaker assented to it yesterday. Accordingly, the Parliamentary Council will make nominations and observations about the appointment to all independent commissions in Sri Lanka. However, via the 20th Amendment to the Constitution, the President is vested with the power to disregard the said nominations as per his wishes.
The final rites of former MP Mary Larin Pereira, who passed away yesterday, will be conducted at the St. Joseph's Church Cemetery in Venapur tomorrow.
Former MP Mary Larin Pereira passed away yesterday at the age of 73. A large crowd gathered at her residence in Venapur to pay their final respects to the remains. Late Mary Lorraine Pereira, who represented the Parliament from 2001 to 2010, was the wife of the late former Minister Festus Pereira and the mother of former State Minister and parliamentarian of the Samagajana Balawege Niroshan Pereira and Nishani Pereira. She was the first founding chairman of the Vennapur Provincial Council. She also served as a member of Northwestern Provincial Council for 13 years from 1988. The final rites are to be held tomorrow evening.
On TV1 for the Newsfirst team, I'm Ratnayaka. Take care, stay safe and good night.